what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Here is a bulletin. Here is a bulletin.
What is it? Stand by, please. Stand by, please.
In Dallas, Texas.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route.
Hey guys, let me introduce you to Mark Mueller. Hi, Mark.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
I think everybody that's here probably knows who I am. They don't know who you are. So can you talk a little bit about you?
Okay. I'm a lawyer in Austin, Texas. I've been practicing law for 40 years. I have done a wide variety of cases from the beginning of my career, criminal law, to medical malpractice cases, product liability cases. Recently, I've turned my focus to environmental cases because I think that that's the most significant thing that we have to deal with in the country is detoxing our world. What's relevant to this cast that we're talking about here today is two things. One, I'm a lawyer, and so I'm always dealing with problem solving and figuring out who did what, where, how, and how to get to the truth of what's going on. And as relevant to this is I, years ago, through a client, got involved in investigating the MLK assassination. I had a client that claimed that his family was involved in this. I don't know whether that's true or not. But as part of my research, I started looking at the various MLK, JFK, RFK assassinations, and it was eye-opening for me because I realized, holy moly, the narrative that we got in the mainstream and the narrative that we got even in schools just was not true. There was an awful lot of misinformation, disinformation, and cover-ups involved. And some of it involved lawyers, and some of it involved politicians, and some of it involved governmental agencies. And so I got into looking at the reality is things are not always what they seem to be. Currently, I'm working on a movement called Truth and Justice League, which is our purpose is to work on environmental problems. It's to restore human health to the extent that we can, because we're, I think, increasingly sick as a nation, both physically and mentally. And the last thing we're working on is the restoration of essentially freedoms. I don't like the fact that when we look on our device, our iPhone or our iPad or whatever, we now get a pop-up ad minutes later for something that we just talked about or said or looked up on the internet. I don't like that level of surveillance. So I'm, I guess, what you might call a person that wants to do good in the world. I want to figure out what's true. I don't have an agenda other than that. At least I hope I don't. Of course, I met you through your background where your dad was a radio newscaster who knew Jack Ruby and had some affiliation with what was going on in Dallas at the time. So
Right.
That's where I'm coming from. So fire away.
Well, what I'm seeing, and a lot of people are seeing, is, kind of what happened with President Trump. And there's a lot of questions out there. And so it kind of spurs on this distrust and the jump to conspiracy theories as opposed to waiting for more information, which I think that's a natural thing to do. I think as humans, we don't like chaos. So we try to get to the solution or a reason so we can relax and say, okay, I can sleep tonight because I think I've got it figured out. But I don't know that there's anything you can do about it, and I do think it's relatively healthy on some level, but some of the stuff that's going around is just kind of wild already. And I think when we look back at JFK, I think a lot of this stems from then, where
Right.
there's that distrust. Because, in 1964, more people believed that it was a lone gunman than they did in 1974. And surely over time, it's come the opposite way, where there's fewer people that believe that it was a lone gunman than believe that that it was a conspiracy.
Right.
So I think that that's interesting, and I think that sets the tone of where we are as a society, and this general distrust of the narrative and who is the narrator, and we don't know who that is really.
Yeah. So we know. I mean, this is a good point, because we do know that in fact we've been lied to in many situations. Just flat out, we were just given untruths, and whether that was for our quote own good or not, okay, that's not really the point of this. But the fact is that we increasingly don't trust. We don't trust the government. We don't trust authorities, and we shouldn't just trust them because they've got a bad track record. Okay?
Right.
Now, but we have an opportunity. I think this is an opportunity for us. It's a tragedy. I'm not in favor of violence. I don't like the way that the country is going, increasingly divided, more and more fear, more and more hate on both sides or all sides. That's not a good situation. So I see this as an opportunity for us to look at what's happening and go, in real time, we can actually look at this. We can look at our own reactions. We can look at our own behavior. We can look at our own way of doing things and try to make this better. So in some way, what this may be is that it's a real opportunity to change the direction of where we're going. If Trump had been killed, there is, I think, would have been a very heightened probability that would have led to even more violence right away. And you've got people that are essentially, people are armed and dangerous. That's just out there. And there are some people that are calling for civil war, and I don't think that's the way to go. And maybe that this is an opportunity for us to look at our language, our divisiveness, the way that we speak, and the effect that might have on other people. Particularly, perhaps, we're guessing on this particular shooter, but we don't know the answers to all those things yet. So let's start with,
we've got two awesome dogs to put in there, especially after comments about bullseyes or hunting them down.
Yeah, language. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, we touched on this moments ago. So
yeah, I think the comments like they'd be better off dead, or the bullet should have been 4 inches one way or the other, that's a good thing. I think we have to watch our language, and I think we have to watch what our intent is, because that may be what you're feeling, but is that really the responsible thing to say, and is it the right thing to do? I'm looking at this as an opportunity. Basically, let's look at what happened. Okay, so if we're trying to in real time solve this situation and learn from it, let's start with the basic questions: who, what happened, how did it happen, why did it happen? Those kind of questions. We know some of those.
Yeah,
I think
right.
And then we're seeing some things. I think one of the things that you're mentioned earlier is, and we both talked about this, is that all of a sudden you see wild things that are being posted as if they're true, and it's hard to tell. Wow, that's interesting. For example, I saw something yesterday that somebody posted that said this is not the real shooter. The real shooter was somebody else, and that person was clearly aligned with the left, and they were out there to cause trouble. They were part of Antifa. Right. Yeah, Antifa and all that kind of stuff. And I believe that's not a true statement. Okay, that's something that just was inflaming things. Some other things are harder to tell. there was a little clip, I saw a little clip, or not a clip, it was a post that purportedly was from the sniper that shot. And it said, I'm the one in the picture that did this. And I want you to know that I had him in my sights. I could have prevented this, but I was told I wasn't given the signal to go ahead, and I could have. But it's 100% the fault of the Secret Service and those types of folks. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. But that's one where I haven't been able to verify that person said that. In looking at the clips that we've seen, it sure looks like there was plenty of opportunity to stop this. At a minimum, this was not very good, not very good security.
Right. Well, I mean, the reports, I guess, this morning are, pushing it back to 26 minutes prior to the event. And that's alarming. Yeah. And there was, I watched an analysis by some snipers saying it looked like the people that were on the perch never actually fired anything, just because of their movements. They were looking through their scope, they were startled, and then by the time they got back into their scope, it was over. So somebody else was taking out the guy. So I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but it was just an analysis. And I think that's kind of interesting to think about, like, who else was there. But then you hear the reports that the building he was on top of, the people that were inside the building were the local police department as in a staging area. And that's even more alarming, that they couldn't hear somebody popping up on a metal building.
Right. And there was, I mean, we've seen plenty. One benefit we do have is that we have a lot of, this was a heavily surveilled event. You've got people with cell phones. I'm sure there's drone footage that we haven't seen yet, and surveillance footage that we haven't seen yet. Because usually there's quite a bit of actual clearing. There should be a lot of clearing of the area first. There almost always is. I mean, they clear these areas for like up to 1,000 yards ahead of time, and
right.
So there shouldn't have been anybody on a roof that close. And then it wasn't like he was not seen.
Right.
We've seen interviews with people saying, "Yeah, I saw him and I pointed him out." And then we've seen pictures of him up there, and we've seen people trying to get attention of the police and whoever. Now there may have been some, who's the police? Who are the agents that are there? Who are we talking to? But yeah, there were plenty of opportunities to stop this. That's a long time. It's a long time. 3 minutes, I think, was the original time frame that they were putting it at. But now they're backing it all the way up to people were suspicious of his behavior when he was going through security, things like that. A scope fell out of his bag or something like that. And again, I don't know if any of that's even true, but we're getting bombarded with this information, which makes people jump into that conspiracy or just ineptitude. And right now I'm leaning more towards ineptitude. And that's alarming to me too. Simply because just because you're the B team doesn't mean you have to act like you're the B team. They should be going through the protocols, regardless of, if it's the regular guys that are taking a night off. I don't know. To me, it just seems like a huge fail. It does. If you look at this from a systems perspective, I mean, people do make mistakes. People do get confused.
Sure.
People do pause when they maybe shouldn't pause. But this kind of a situation has systems in place to prevent that. And this is, boy, you've got the Secret Service and the police doing an official, doing an official event like this. Especially after what happened in the 60s and 70s and, all that kind of stuff. There was heightened alert. So that fans this flame, right? So how could this have happened? People are capable of tremendous negligence, There's no doubt about that. You know, but what's this all about? You know, I think it gives us an opportunity to look at we don't know much about this kid yet, do we? I mean,
no, we don't.
He
has an unusually low profile or footprint on social media for a 20-year-old. I mean, and my instinct on that would be to look into like the gaming communities and see if that's where he was communicating, you know,
right.
Instead of going on to mainstream social media.
Yeah. You know, the school shooter, the school shooter thing is, you know, we can maybe compare it to some of that, but that's not entirely accurate. But when we look at school shootings, might as well take this on right now. Okay. School shootings are not a good thing.
Buckle up, chat.
So school shootings are not a good thing. And there've been way too many. And we all agree with that. And then when a school shooting happens, you know, we had a school shooting. It happened in Texas, so Uvalde. Right. And there was a very long length of time in which the law enforcement folks there didn't really get active and do what they're supposed to do. Now that's a smaller community. That was not like Secret Service. This shouldn't be this level of training, but there still was a failure to follow through to protect these kids that should happen. But in looking at, I mean, this is one of those things where we're looking at it. I'd look at this stuff as a lawyer, you know, and investigating these things. And it's not just one factor usually. You look at this kind of school shooting, you look at what's going on. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, there's a number of features that are in common. You've got somebody who has a mental health issue of sorts, traumatized, you know, abused, picked on, lonely, what have you, not fitting in. Oftentimes that situation is known about, but it's not properly handled or treated. Oftentimes they're given, you know, I would say psychotropic meds, which also are not benign. And they can affect the people. If you look at the warning labels and you know enough about the various kinds of antipsychotic type psychotropic meds, they have some vicious side effects. And some of those.
Well, sometimes it's even making the ideas worse than helping the ideas. Right. So that's why it should be very closely monitored with counseling and
yes,
you know, other you know.
Yes, you got
treatment.
That. Yes, you got very, very true. And then you've got this. You mentioned gaming, and that's there's let's just look at the effect of electronic media, and we'll call the gaming one of those. Is the gaming stuff makes it easy to learn how to do all these kinds of things, right? You're basically a hero in a game and killing people. There's also the internet and the logarithms and stuff that go along with that. So any research into any topic or whatever, if you're looking for something, the way that those systems work is going to drive you increasingly into a darker hole where you're going to see what you want to find, and it's going to take you even into a darker space.
Right.
And,
it's an echo chamber.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get that, you know, and, you know, I don't know if I should mention this now or just tell me not to, the story that I told you about my person that I knew. But there's
oh, sure.
Okay. So I got interviewed. This was a few years ago. And I won't say the name of the person. I'll just give you the circumstances. But it was a friend of mine that was an ordinary human being, maybe a little sometimes, you know, could go over the edge a little bit, but I just considered them to be a normal human being with normal human being problems. And this person went increasingly down into what you would call a conspiracy rabbit hole type thing. This was in the realm of this was back when the QAnon stuff was being very big, and it was also being promoted to divide people and, you know, make people enemies and what have you. And one of the things was found was that people that had various types of mental instabilities were very much more prone to going down the trail and then going to a call to action, okay, and to do something about something. So the example here would be that happened in this particular situation was, you remember the story about the Pizzagate guy? There was a guy that showed up with a gun, that whole thing, right? The person believed, and I'm not getting into whether it's true or not. It's just saying the person believed that they needed to do something to prevent a horrific injury to a child. And we would hope that anybody who actually saw that kind of situation would try to stop it. You don't want to see a child abused. You don't want to see that kind of thing happening. And so the person that I knew somehow got the impression that this person, an adult, was picking up a child at some event. She got it in her head that this was a pedophile that was going to do something terrible to this kid, and she had to do something about it. And so she she was in her car, and the bottom line was she ended up getting arrested because she at high speed drove this other person off the freeway to an exit ramp and rammed into their car in a parking lot to try to stop what she thought in her mind was absolutely something terrible that was going to happen to a child. She was wrong. Okay. Right. And also she was impaired. She had alcohol, she had drugs on board, and we had this terrible situation. So there was one of the things that came out of this research at the time was that people are in their own minds, the people that are not in a completely stable situation absolutely believe that they need to do something to prevent a greater evil. And we would hope that everybody acts that way to prevent a greater evil if it's apparent. The problem is in the selection of what they're going to act on. The mode of
right.
Yeah, are you right? Especially if you're high, if you're
right.
Not, but different stages of this is people we're seeing there is mental illness in the country, and none of us are spared from that, and all of us are subject to that happening to us. As I like to say, it's a thin dotted line between any of us and somebody who's on the streets or in a mental hospital. How thin is that line? Most of us end up doing okay, but
right.
But the wrong turn, the wrong circumstances, a tougher background, maybe you don't do so okay. And so,
right. Well, and I think right now a lot of people are depending on the media to get their information, and we've learned that some of these outlets are not necessarily going to tell us the full picture. Some people haven't figured that out yet. And so they don't do their own research, and they get upset about something that may or may not be 100% accurate. Not that we ever can be 100% accurate, but we can at least find out what feels right to us once you do your own research a little bit.
Right.
I think what is the saying? Something rings true. There's it has a different sound to it when you find truth. And usually it would be some sort of sense of comfort or, resolve or whatever it is. But when the information that's coming out makes you upset, and that keeps making you upset, can cause a lot of instability, I think, in some very fragile minds.
Yeah. Well, you just hit on a very good point. And that is we as a nation, we're kind of on a divided highway, and it appears it appears to be getting worse. Okay. And if you want to look at it from a negative perspective, we're on a divided highway barreling full speed ahead, and it's going to be a bad crash unless we do something about it. Because that's what's happening. And one of the things that, I don't know, that was hard for me to believe, because I was a small town Midwest person. I guess I grew up kind of naive. Okay. I did not appreciate the extent to which clickbait and stories and, exaggerated stories and narratives actually really affect the way that we see information. And you're absolutely right in that you get this like, wow, you look at the source, and the sources are not, I don't look at something as being necessarily not true because it's on one of the stations or the other. But you do see that it looks like that there is the information is spun on one side or another, particularly in an election year. It's all
Right.
It's all coming to play. So everybody's trying to spin everything, and and that gets a little confusing because you mentioned earlier we're trying to make sense out of things, right? And so there's too much information out there. How can we ever know all what's going on and figure out what's going on? We don't. So we have to figure out some baseline of reality. And so do we get that from a source that makes us feel better? Okay. In doing so, do we overlook other factors that we probably should be looking at? Or are we relying on our friends? You see this going on in Facebook all the time. And I've done it myself. The meme wars, it's so easy to slap a meme out there that makes fun of somebody, and it's not exactly accurate. And there are assumptions made in this, and it's for an agenda. And there's the battling of the memes. All it does is inflame people, fire people up. Does it really ever change anyone's mind?
No, but I think it's also a way of venting stress. I mean, there's probably a lot of memers in this chat. So, but we have a tendency, or at least the people that my community or other communities that I'm a part of, sometimes we use memes as a way of taking the edge off of a serious topic.
Yeah. Well, we can't lose our sense of humor. We can't lose our sense of humor either.
No, yeah. I'm very well grounded in the sense of humor of things. So I try to lean that way a little bit. Maybe it's gallows humor, but it helps me. It helps me process that stuff. What am I going to do? Get really angry and lose my mind over something? No, I'm going to make fun of it. Yeah. And sometimes I'm making fun of myself. So there's a little bit of that. So it's kind of I see both sides. I see what you're saying, but I also understand why at least some of the people in this community.
I'm not saying there's not a place for it either, because some things are just funny too,
Right.
They're just funny. They might be rude, they might be inappropriate, but they're funny. And and if the extent that we can't laugh at ourselves as humans, we're in trouble because we do a lot of really stupid things, and we're living in a world that sometimes and usually doesn't make a lot of sense. And so so humor is good. So what do you think happened, by the way, in Pennsylvania?
Well, what I'm seeing.
What are you looking at now? Yeah.
What I'm seeing, or at least my initial response was, well, that's crazy. How did this happen? Then I'm looking at the reality that they didn't clear the grounds.
Right.
And, and now you're hearing stories that it's, Homeland Security was there instead of Secret Service. And that's alarm. I'm not saying that institution isn't, well trained, but they obviously dropped the ball here, if that's true. And, whose job was it to communicate the protocol and to ensure the protocol was being adhered to is my biggest issue right now. Because that to me is, somebody who needs to be held accountable for, one, just to make sure it doesn't happen again. Right. If I'm Trump, I'm vetting everybody from now on. And that's unnerving that he has to do that.
Yeah. And, and to step in another situation, one of the good things that happen from this is going to have heightened awareness of security. And they finally gave protection to Robert Kennedy Jr., who should have gotten protection all along. So that guy had people breaking into his house early on.
Right.
I mean, if anything, my God, does the Kennedy have people out there that might want to do something with that? Yeah. And he's been out there, in public and doing stuff with his own security, and then maybe that's a better thing, but it costs a lot of money.
Right. It does cost a lot of money, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. I think that we really need to take a look at what were the communications on that side of things. I mean, yes, we've got people looking into the to Crook's background, and that's going to take a while. And, I think I told you this earlier. We knew more about Oswald in the first 48 hours than we know about this guy.
Yeah, there's not much information there. And if you want to look at, I put my lawyer hat on a lot of times. And if you're looking at this as and I've done negligent security cases back in the day, apartment houses not secured properly. Somebody gets in and, kills somebody or rapes somebody or something like that. So look, I've done cases like that, looked at cases like that. From a negligent security standpoint, this one is pretty easy because you had failure to clear the area. You had multiple apparent failures along the way of seeing things that were out of sorts, that were not responded to properly. There were multiple opportunities. And in many situations, one of the things that is just a fact of life is that in any event, if you're looking at any single event under a microscope, you start seeing all kinds of factors that were in play. And there were usually multiple opportunities for something to turn out a different way. Anything from, car accidents to construction accidents to just, what happened in your house with your kids. There's usually multiple opportunities to stop something bad from happening, and see that people weren't paying attention, they're doing it intentionally, or overall, nobody was acting on the idea that we should have been more careful to begin with, because this kind of stuff is predictable to a degree. And when you put it into a situation like what we have here, this is high stakes. This is a big public event. And there are obviously protocols. There are obviously reasons. There's obviously more likely to have something happen at an event like this than there would be, just at a random mall, especially in today's climate. So is there something negligent involved here? Oh yeah. There's multiple fingers to point. Where do we go from there? Is there something beyond that? Is there something, is there something more beyond just the terrible negligence? We don't know that yet. Right.
Well, and, Squid says she doesn't trust the government to investigate themselves.
Well, history would tell us that often that's an accurate observation. It's hard to trust anybody to investigate themselves. If you're a person that is, of a person of good character, even then you don't want to look at something that you might have done that hurt somebody or something like that. We would hope that you would have an honest look at your own behavior and look into what happened and make efforts to, repair the damage and not do it again and prevent it from happening again. I totally sympathetic with somebody and understand what somebody's saying, that I don't trust the government to investigate themselves. And
I don't feel very confident about if we had another HSCA or even another commission investigating, because you're still looking at the same thing. So, but then where do you go and who do you trust?
Yeah. Well, in this situation, it's a good opportunity for the government to step up, right? It's a good opportunity for the government agencies to step up and actually be transparent and do a better job, because they know they're being looked at this time. And so it's an opportunity, if they want to reestablish trust, this would be a good time to start. To honestly look at the situation, to take responsibility, whichever way it falls, and to come clean on this particular part. Okay, that's not going to clear the deck for everything that's happened in the past, but it's a good.
Who's they?
Well, if you're looking at Who's the they? Well, if you're looking at the alphabet agencies, the law enforcement agencies, and those kinds of folks, or even Congress and Senate, okay, because there are lots of commissions and things that go on, and that's part of the problem too. They did it with the JFK thing. That they did the Warren Commission. You know, they didn't get to the reality of what's going on. They had another commission later on. They didn't get to what's really going on. So it was a failure. So it's the failure of the agencies that are responsible for security investigation, and then it's the responsibility of the people that have oversight for them, which gets into the political realm of things. But ultimately, here's what I say, okay? It's up to us, we the people, to start demanding better and start doing better ourselves. Because I'm not one of those people who thinks the government's going to save us. I'm not one of those, you know, and I think that we ourselves have, and this is a good situation for us to look at, because there's an abundance of information that happened right here in front of us. We have modern technology, we have cell phones, we have internet, we have a lot of ability to assess what happened here, and to be clear-headed about this, and to problem solve this as a nation, live right here. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to get to solve 95% of this in the next couple of weeks. I don't think there's any way we should be able to do that. There's always going to be deeper questions that occur. But when you say solve, what do you mean solve? Well, okay, so we should be able to get to the bottom will we be able to agree that this person shot Trump? Okay, and the other person. So who shot those people? Okay. Now, when you got into the other assassination things, you see that it's most people now don't think Oswald ever fired a shot. And that it's very clear that there were multiple people involved, and there was government cover-up involved, and there was government planning involved. That's pretty clear. So the first thing is who? Okay, this guy was not probably a designated patsy, which is what people talk about Oswald. It's a setup. Right. You know, here's your fall guy. Was this a fall guy, or did he really do this, or was he manipulated into doing that? I think we should be able to figure that part out.
Well, I mean, I do think it's interesting that he chooses this building. I mean, like, how much of this layout did he understand prior to? What made him choose that particular building when he's crawling on top of a warehouse full of cops and nobody notices? That's weird. Well, and that causes a lot of people to say something's not right.
That's a legit, not just something's not right, but it raises the question of, was there help? Okay. Was there help from the inside? Okay. And whether that is organized help, or whether that's, you know, somebody had a buddy that happened to be on the ground that let them in, or something like that. I don't know that, but this was very conspicuous. This was a very conspicuous situation. So I don't know. What's your intuition on that one? Did he have help getting there, or was it just a unbelievable amount of negligence all occurring at once? How'd you get on a roof?
I think they've determined there was an AC unit that made it easier. It was kind of a low roof line. I don't know. I would have to see a lot more information to be able to get there, you know, schematics and all of that to even begin to understand it. There was a ladder that apparently was attached that should have been detached, or it was not. It wasn't attached, but was just left there for access. I mean, it could be a systematic breakdown of protocol. It could be that simple.
It could be that simple.
I just don't think we believe in that anymore, because of what we've experienced in the past. And so our default is there's something hinky going on here. And I don't know that we can get around that, but I do think, once they get into the investigation of this kid's background and get onto his equipment and all of his devices, maybe you'll see a different picture. But will we believe, like, we're going to go back to the same thing with JFK. Will you believe the truth when you hear it?
Right. Well, and in this day and age, okay, don't you think that we're seeing cell phone videos and things like that. Was there complete surveillance by video of this area? And if so, will we ever see that?
Right. Well, I think we've seen enough to know that law enforcement, security, whatever you want to call it, were not responding to what citizens were screaming at the top of their lungs. I mean, we had people that just came there to party and be a part of the show, trying to save a man's life.
Yeah.
And they were ignored. And we see that. It's on video. So there's no denying that part of it. But again, I'd like to see what did they do beforehand, and what were the protocols supposed to be, and who dropped the ball, and then we can ask why.
I'd love to see a time lapse video of this whole thing, and I'm wondering if that exists.
You mean of the whole big picture?
Yeah,
like drone coverage.
Oh, I don't know whether that was going on then or not, but
it would be awesome if it was.
That would be awesome if it was. That's a good question for us to ask. So maybe somebody in the audience knows. Does anybody know that or has seen it?
I don't have that. I mean, the only thing that I found was where they've taken different segments and different videos and kind of running them simultaneously. But there's a lot of cutoff and you can't see the whole thing. And I know what you're asking for, and I would hope that it's out there somewhere. That would be fantastic. But I don't know if they didn't allow drones because of security.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe not. Maybe maybe there was air clearance where there,
exactly
what's that going on? Yeah, I don't know enough about that.
But there may be other surveillance video on the buildings themselves. So that would be interesting to get. And I'm sure we're not going to see that until it's already all put together and assembled for us in a little package. So we'll see.
You were saying something about Homeland Security was involved in this. I mean, I don't know where the delineations were.
From my understanding, and chat can, and they will correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was that the usual team had moved ahead. His security team had moved ahead to Milwaukee to kind of prepare there. So he was getting a backup team, and there weren't enough Secret Service. So they brought in some Homeland Security agents to fill in the gaps.
That's interesting. So yeah. So, if you look at let's look at another view of this is that from a timing of when this happened. Okay. And I'm not inviting conspiracy here or people to go crazy about this, but the timing of this was pretty interesting. It's right ahead of the convention.
It's really interesting.
Right ahead of the convention. And it's right after two major events that happened that to me would be very significant for this election. One was Biden's debate performance that everybody was paying attention to. And I'm not even going to talk about Trump's debate performance at this point, but the Biden's one was the one that got the most attention because people started calling for him to step down because he was not remembering things and that kind of stuff. And then right after that, I think it was right after that, at least that's when I became aware of it, was this Heritage Foundation 2025 thing that came out, which was, at least I haven't read it, just the reports that I'm seeing on it appeared to be fairly wide, wide impact, affecting an awful lot of people potentially, of everything: veterans, people of color, women, marriage and family, LGBTQ, the whole thing. It was wide. Social Security, Medicaid. I mean, it looked like it was a giant take me away the rights of a huge portion of the population. So you had those two events going on that were really, stirred up, because it was like, at one point it was people were like seeing the Biden debate going, oh my God, we're in trouble. The Democrats are in trouble. This. And then the next thing came out was, well, this is even worse for the other side. And then all of it right ahead of this convention in Milwaukee. So it was whether that was timing by design or timing by opportunity, I don't know. Fact is, this kid was from near there. So, maybe that's just, it just happened. Maybe this was just a local event that had a chance to play itself out.
Well, from what I understand about the Heritage Foundation is they do these reports on a regular basis and try to promote them. And they are ultra conservative, kind of even preposterously so. Sorry, Randy, he hates it when I use that word. So I don't know that anybody's ever taken it as a guidebook, but they do they do put it out there, and I do think that they have some sort of campaign support, but maybe they're just justifying their existence by supporting campaigns. That doesn't mean the campaign buys onto what they pitch. So I don't know. I haven't done a deep dive into them. Like, this is happening kind of in real time, so I wanted to get with you on this before it got too far along, and kind of take a look at it from that first 48 or so 72 hours after an event, and say, where are we compared to where we were 65 years ago or 61 years ago. We're kind of where we were 10 years ago is my feeling on it.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of distrust, and we've got more division than we had 10 years ago. It's probably some of the worst division we've had since, maybe the early days of the country. I mean, yeah. I don't really know. I mean, I don't know how you would compare the two, because it's so different.
This feels very, we are very, very divided. And, I think that, again, it's going to come down to the people, the regular people that are like us. We're talking, right? Right. I have friends that are for Trump. I have friends that are for Biden. I have friends that are for RFK Jr. And they're still going to be my friends. And no matter what, we don't agree on all kinds of things. But what we got is, I think we have right now is we as a group are going to decide what we want to be like as a country and as a world. And we have an enormous amount of problems to deal with. We have war, we have the environment, we have division everywhere. We have a wide disparity of wealth that is gone beyond extreme, to where you're seeing 8 or 10 people own as much as the next 50% of the population, or some number like that. It's pretty extreme. One of the reasons that I got involved in building, what I would call my movement, right, to get people involved, is we're trying to use art and music and various tools to help people see the problems that we're dealing with and come to better solutions for this. Because, I see that we are, as humans, we've been through things before, and we don't know, we think this is the worst ever, but, we weren't there when the Black Plague happened, or, all these other kinds of things. There have been a lot of bad things that have happened in humanity. But right now, it feels like the pressure is on, and we're dealing with an awful lot of surmounting environmental problems, toxic food, toxic water, air, contamination. People are increasingly in poor health, chronic illnesses, cancers,
Right.
inflammatory diseases, all this. And it feels like it's accelerating because we've got like the media and social media on steroids. So we're getting hit with all this stuff. Somehow, right now, in the midst of all this stuff, plus there's war, and there's the Ukraine, and there's Gaza, and all these are not small things. Somehow, in the midst of this, we, the people, have to somehow perform at our very best to figure out how to work together and come up with good ideas to move things forward in a positive way. That's a big challenge. This is the hero's journey we're in, and you're part. You're part
That's
of it.
awesome. Right. Right.
Yeah.
What's our hero arc? So you want to talk about, how can people find out about your foundation, and, if they want to learn more about what you're doing or get involved, where do they go?
Yeah. So, okay. So I hesitate to say this, but we have a website, but it's being redone right now. There's not a lot on there right now, but it's truthandjusticeleague.com. And there will be more and more. Right now, there's stuff on there about our art, because we're using a lot of art and murals to illustrate the larger problems in society. But that's where you'll go to find us. And we are we're in the process of building a big community that has scientists, healers, journalists, community activists. We're working with groups all over the country. So there's a group in Louisiana called Rise St. James. That's a group that is a faith-based group in southern Louisiana that's banding together to try to stop the chemical plants from expanding, and it's in Cancer Alley. So that's one of the projects that we're working on right now is trying to help those folks who are battling for their lives in Cancer Alley. So, we've been calling this Cancer Alley for however long, right? A long, long time. You know what I'm talking about, the area that's
Right.
between East Texas and New Orleans. And seven of the highest 10 cancer zip codes in the country are right in there. And that's just been going on. You can smell it, you can see it, and it's still ongoing. When we look at those kind of problems, we're dealing with water contaminations, we're dealing with the forever chemicals, we're dealing with increased amounts of pesticides, Roundup, all these kinds of things. Those are very real things. And in industry, I look at this as industry, it's a huge economic impact on things. But industry is not inclined to change their behavior. So it takes a lot of work to go change that behavior. It takes citizens voting. It takes legal actions, and it takes taking the campaign to the public. When are we going to stop the killing? When are we going to stop the polluting? When are we going to stop the craziness? That's
Right.
That's what we get to decide.
I'm not a fan of the FDA. I think they're extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
They don't seem to care about us at all. In my personal opinion, just cause more damage than it does good.
Well, what you see with that, I got pretty big into learning about regulatory agencies and doing the products liability cases that I've done, pharmaceuticals and transvaginal mesh and stuff like that. And, the agencies were set up to try to protect us, and they can, but they don't really do it. And to a certain degree, they're captive. And they're really good people in some of those, in every one of these groups, there's really good people. But the systems themselves are pretty stale, and you see an awful lot of influence by industry. Industry has the money, and one example of this is that the FDA, they obviously regulate drugs, pharmaceuticals, and stuff like that, and it's a huge money-making industry. One of the things that goes on in sort of that realm of things is that personal care products are something that are the main focus there is to keep those things from being regulated by the FDA. So, and I think some of these things are some of the most damaging things that there are. And I'm talking about, personal care products that have hazardous chemicals in them, whether it's perfumes, makeups. If you ever look and see what's in most of the tampons and things like that, right? There are toxic chemicals in all those things, and we're putting them in our body and on our body. And I think it's one of the contributors to a lot of increasing problems with women's health, particularly. Somehow women seem to get the worst run of it. Why is that? But we sure see it a lot.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you've got lawyerly things to do today, but do you have any predictions on what we think we're going to find out from either from the alphabet soup or about the background on this guy? What are you thinking?
Well, okay. So I think that there's going to be a finding. There are going to be findings that there was obviously negligence involved with lots of folks. There will be a dispute over who did what, where, who, how, who's more significant to that. The young man involved is the wild card. Something in terms of what his personal psychology was and what drove him to do this. I think I'm just guessing here, but this is a pretty dramatic event. Okay, so you just don't go do something like this and think you're going to get away with it. Okay, no. So this guy
walking away.
This guy was going to end up dead if he fired the gun. He was going to end up dead, most likely. Small chance they would get hauled off and do life in prison or whatever, because he's or in a mental institution or whatever happened. So I think there'll be a significant contribution. I hope that people look and see what the factors were. But I mean, it's always going to be some degree of guesswork here because you got somebody who's dead. So you can't really, you have to construct this looking at other things. You can't ask him. You can't test him. You can't do any of those kinds of things. I predict it's going to be a factor of, there's something that goes on. He definitely was triggered. Whether there were other factors that led him down that trail, we don't know that because he's a pretty smart guy too. So from what I understand, this guy was pretty intelligent. So whether this was a relative spur of the moment or whether this was planned for a long time, I don't know. I don't know that factor. What do you think?
Right. Well, knee-jerk response is obviously some sort of mental crisis. Whether it, made him scared for the future or made him angry about, a particular person specifically. I don't know what those motivations could be, but I think we have an epidemic of young adults who are choosing violence, whether it's at a school or or at a mall or, this on this stage. So I think that's something that has to be addressed. I don't know that we can ever get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing, we got to look at is, and I've had to look at this myself. I look at myself and go, am I being compassionate and kind with people? Because people, all of us, and I've been through my own days, long, hard nights of the soul, things like that. My own personal things. My family has too. I'm sure you have as well. I know you have. We have to learn to be kinder, and we have to treat the mental health issues that are out there in some kind of realistic way. We've got to start solving these problems. Addictions, mental health problems, instability, all these kinds of things. That needs to be a big focus. We can't just throw pills at everything either, by the way. That won't work.
Right. No, I agree. Agreed. Pills are not the answer. Well, I know you've got things to do, so I don't want to take up all of your day.
You can have me at any time. I mean, we just did this as an experiment, and
Yeah.
you know, the takeaway from this is, you know, we're just two people. We met in a real kind of random way, right? And we met in a random way. So yeah, she's the aunt of a tattoo artist for a lawyer friend of mine, and then he said, you should talk to her because her dad knew Jack Ruby. So we followed through, we met each other, and I encouraged her to pursue her own truth and get involved. And she's done a great job. And I thank you.
Well, thank you.
You've done a great job of doing that. And you're learning a lot from that experience because you jumped right into the hot water of the JFK related.
Oh, I don't think so. I like to play around the skirt of the abyss.
Well, anyway, but we'll stay in touch. And I'm actually setting up my podcast equipment today and tomorrow. So,
what's the name of the podcast?
It'll be Truth and Justice League podcast.
And where will we find that?
Well, I don't know yet. What do you recommend? Do you like YouTube?
No. I do like YouTube. You know, there are some restrictions, you know, as far as language, because they want to protect they have a long list of protected words. Rumble is a little bit more free speech, but you can simulcast to both of those. YouTube can convert your streams into podcasts. And I think that there's other ways to push it out there. I'm not familiar. I haven't done the research to push it out to the other platforms.
Well, I'm just getting started with this. You know, I have spent a lot of time working on the infrastructure. You know, I published some poetry books that introduce kind of what we're doing and to chronicle some of the things that I personally have been going through. And what I see is a call to duty. I mean, call to duty is, I think, a game. I shouldn't have said that, but
it's a call of duty.
A call of duty. See, I've never played a video game in my life, so I guess I shouldn't even be talking about those things. But you know, we're at a point now where it's an important time. It's an epic time in history. I'm actually really glad to be alive right now and having the ability to talk with you and talk with other folks and do what we can. And I'm making a point. I'm actually encouraged by where we are. I talk to people every day, whether it's a Uber driver, a Lyft driver, people at the gym, people at the coffee shop. I talk to people every day. And I'm finding that the everyday average people, they're pretty good people. And they see what's going on. There's a heavy distrust of what's going on. Most people just want to live their lives and, you know, and get their food and have their family and enjoy their time. And they see that they're being manipulated and they understand that. And I think when we get talking to individual human beings, then we got a chance, you know, and we don't. And one of the things that we're working with at Truth and Justice League is music and art and film. Because that's a way that we can convey messages, messages of hope, messages of sorrow, messages of pain, whatever. We can do that without battering each other and talking heads. You know, the message gets through. It's easier to absorb when it comes along with some good music, some good visuals, and it invites you to kind of see a better way to go. That's where I'm at.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to end this here.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and I will try to touch base with you once we get some more of these little elements going and see we can take the temperature of, you know, what's going on again. All right. Awesome.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh no. The motorcade sped on.